This is Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, a podcast and radio program presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan.
Driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
And now, here he is, your host, Jim Ervin.
Baby, I'm home.
Well, thank you so much, Parker, and welcome to Time Signatures. I'm your host, Jim Ervin, and I'm absolutely ecstatic to have as my guest today two of Michigan's most incredible musicians with an equally incredible history, sometimes together, many times apart. Stuart Tucker, the former drummer with Chicago Pete and the Detroiters, and Dave Huber, most notably, at least in the Lansing area, of the Blue Avenue Delegates. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today on Time Signatures. Welcome.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Glad to have you. So I want to get things started by talking a little bit about your history in music. And I want each of you to take a turn on this. I'll start with Dave. Where did you get your start in music, and what's kept you both active all these years?
Oh, well, let's see. My parents, most of my family have been musicians. My start came a little bit later than most. Actually, Stuart was sort of there to witness it.
Okay.
But, I got very interested in jazz music in high school. Didn't play an instrument. I guess I thought about it for a little while before the notion of picking up the saxophone hit me, which it did. And I took a woodwind class my second year at U of M, University of Michigan, Flint.
Okay.
That was in this winter semester, probably 1975, maybe.
Okay.
And that fall, I prevailed upon the band director to let me join the jazz ensemble. And believe me, I could barely play anything. But he was the instructor in my woodwind class the previous semester. And I don't know if he was being nice or what the situation was, but he let me into the jazz ensemble. And I can't recall if Stuart was there then, but he was there shortly after that. And from that point forward, there was no question that I was going to try and play. And
Okay.
that's kind of the way it worked out.
Stuart, how about you?
Yeah, my parents, my father was not musical at all, but loved music and was building a pretty incredible record collection, mainly interesting rock music and folk music of the 60s and some jazz. And then my mom was musical, but she didn't pursue it, but she could play piano and sing very well. And then they said, well, we want all you kids to try out and play a musical instrument and see how it goes. And all of us did. And I wanted to do the drums, and we lived in New Jersey then. And then I liked the Beatles, and the rock music of the day was getting very interesting, and I wanted to play it. That was my thing. I always wanted to play songs. I didn't really want to be a blazing drum soloist or anything like that. So I wanted to play songs that I liked. I wanted to play drums on them. We moved to Michigan and did more and more, and was playing and jamming with buddies and stuff in high school. And I was discovering more and more jazz, and through my dad or friends, got to see Count Basie, and it was the real Count Basie. He was still alive. Butch Miles was on drums.
Wow.
Jimmy Forrest stood up and played Night Train, man.
Wow.
All through.
Wow.
Yeah, he was in the band still. I mean, that was something. And
When was that?
was probably 73, 74
Okay.
at Clarence. There was a big series, Clarenceville High School. You may have heard about that, David. They did a ongoing jazz series. And then in Flint, parents of other friends told us that Stan Kenton was playing. And were you at that concert?
No, but I heard about it.
Yeah, I went to that. He
Good.
was very old. It was probably pretty soon and he would pass away, but I went to that and I was listening to more and more jazz. Then I said, I want to play jazz because it seems to be the path to really studying the drums. And it definitely was at that point, and really still is, I think. But So I got into U of M Flint, and that's where I met David. And I was right in as a music major, and it was the fall of '76. And yeah, that's when it was. That's when we met up, and we were in the big band and the
Yeah.
smaller groups. And so then we were pursuing it and sort of took it from there and pursuing more jazz but wanted to play interesting rock music, like tuneful melodic stuff. And then got more and more into the blues and I started buying BB King albums when I was in high school.
Mhm.
And then David and I, we I was in a rock band that played some originals. It's kind of a Southern rock band, pretty high quality. And our late pal, Bruce Crawley was in that band. And then one of the guys in that band was Jay Whitney. And Jay started talking to me on the side, saying, we should really get in a blues band, Stuart. I said, what's that? And I knew about BB King and John Lee Hooker. And Jay had a lot of ideas about, you mentioned blues being a banquet.
Mhm.
He definitely had the banquet approach. He was very knowledgeable. He was older. He's from Wisconsin and saw a lot of music in Chicago, I think. And so we started this band, the Big Mouth Blues Band.
That's right.
And that was about what year?
That
1970s.
well, it was 79, I'd
Okay.
say. And I was probably trying to get out of the Southern rock band Sundance and going back to college and all this stuff. And Jay had a whole range of material he wanted to do. He was writing tunes. We would play some jazz standards. We play then funkier stuff by the Crusaders, a Jeff Lorber fusion,
Yeah.
and Jay's original tunes, which were swinging, and Louis Jordan.
But Charlie Parker, too.
Charlie Parker. It was
Romance without finance.
Yes, it was a big range of stuff. And we got all these gigs around Detroit and Ann Arbor and Flint. And some personnel varied in the band. And,
I want to stop you for a minute because I don't want you to go too far because Dave told me I needed to ask you a couple of questions. And I've got those coming up. But your front man, Jay Whitney, was something else, according to Dave.
Yeah.
Dave, talk about him for a minute. And then, like I told you guys at the beginning, feel free to bounce back and forth,
Yeah. It's odd because Stuart met him before I did.
Okay.
I don't know if Jay was living out in Almont.
Yeah, and in Sundance. We got him into Sundance somehow.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I hadn't met him before then. I expect Stuart knew him before I did, but the thing about Jay was on a couple levels, he was a good front man. He was a really good singer.
Yeah.
And he was an excellent blues, R&B / jazz kind of approach to his playing. And it was really well developed. So I think in a lot of respects, he brought so much to the table that you ended up learning a great deal.
Okay.
Yeah, really, the scene needs a million guys like Jay Whitney, or even 10 or 20, each doing it in their own way.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how I got in that band, but it could have been because Bruce Crawley, the guys you mentioned, was on the band or joining the band.
Oh, yeah, he's in it, playing bass.
So one thing led to another, and as Stuart alluded to, we were playing here or over in Flint, but was it you that got all those jobs in Detroit?
A bunch of them, yeah. Yeah,
Stuart
Jay
and-
got some too, but
Yeah. It was really something because we were going from 0 to 60 in short order.
mhm.
Now, speaking of the gigs in Detroit, Dave tells me that you had a knack for finding interesting gigs around the city of Detroit. Talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, well, there were a lot of places to play, and it's not just that I'm older now and can't seem to find them. No, there aren't now. There are all kinds of little joints that
Yeah.
The Song Shop,
the Song Shop, Delta Lady,
Delta Lake.
Union Street on the east side, Old Detroit, and other places that came and went that I'm not remembering. These places were around for quite a while. And Alvin's, yeah, we didn't play Alvin's, but uh,
Floods in Ann Arbor,
Floods in Ann Arbor. Um,
which I do remember playing.
yeah. They'd have music a lot, many nights,
Joe's Star Bar.
Joe's Star Lounge in Ann Arbor, which is a big deal. I mean, Joe Taboni is still alive, and he has a radio show on EMU. Is it the Blues Cruise? I think he's got his blues show still. I mean, Star Lounge. REM played there.
Wow.
Los Lobos played there. I think more than once, and others. And so there was a more like interesting music, not top 40, not oldies, and not tribute bands. Could get gigs, you could get gigs doing this, and it was entertaining to people. And they enjoyed it, and you could commit jazz in public,
Yeah.
which was great. And so we were on the hunt for this stuff. And then there were festivals that got us on the Detroit Blues Festival.
Okay.
Yeah.
Down at Hart Plaza in Detroit.
Yeah.
What was I have to ask you, what was that like being on the stage at the Blues Fest in Hart Plaza? That had to be incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was.
Yeah, it was. It sure was. We weren't on the big stage. We were on the Pyramid, which is a pretty big stage. And a lot of famous
Big
people
enough.
played there.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say plenty, yeah.
Big enough. And
Yeah, and we were playing first with us, and then somebody would come out and front the band, right?
yeah, we
Little
back up
Mac
the Parade of
Collins
Stars. Yeah, Little Matt Collins. I think Washboard Willie might have played right before us.
Wow.
He was kind of a legendary guy.
Yeah.
Um, And so these old guys from the blues scene were around that had really, really been around. I mean, Little Mac was from Mississippi, and his brother was Mr. Bo, and we might have backed him up too.
Yeah.
Mr. Bo had hit it pretty big with some 45s, but those guys grew up with BB King, and
Man.
in Indianola, and Mr. Bo or Mac used to book BB King like in their high school days or something like this. I mean,
Man.
hilarious stuff, but. Yeah, I played with then later I'd play with Little Mac for quite a while, like in the mid 80s to the early 90s. I played with him a lot. Little Mac Collins and the New Party Makers. But that was our introduction to him. And anyway, so
Yeah, very interesting times for sure.
Oh yeah.
You know, yeah, well, it's just not like that now, but there's something to be said for being in the right place at the right time.
Well, and it was a different time back then. It seemed like,
It was.
and I'm just remembering little things from when I was a kid, not musically speaking, but I mean, it was truly a different time where you could get those opportunities, I'm sure.
Well, you know what, in retrospect, for me, looking back on it now, the thing was a lot of the people that are revered today, and even the lesser folks, were getting after it. I mean, the scene was happening, the people were there. Yeah. I don't want to say it doesn't happen now because it does, but
It's not as prevalent though, is it?
it's hard to say.
Well, I think one of you made a comment. We were doing I guess a musical enjoyment visit before we decided to sit down and record this. Somebody had mentioned that, nowadays, while you're sitting here talking, 1,000 people are hitting the send button and uploading their music.
that they just recorded in their
Yeah.
bedrooms.
And
Yeah.
so you think maybe that's the difference in the world now because of the internet availability?
Well, I know it's true for me.
Yeah.
Well, does that make it so people don't go out? Is kind of what your question is a little
Yeah.
bit. There's no venues because everybody's just happy making their own music because they can. Maybe. Um, but yeah, I think it was also sort of the descent, not I don't mean in a bad way, but sort of the cascade from the hippie culture. A lot of those joints, that's kind of creative, interesting, weird stuff was sort of, I think, cascading from that original thing. Dare I say it, even Woodstock and
Okay.
um, down to a more prosaic level of your corner bar is having something that's more interesting. In Flint, Doobies, the Billies, I mean, I mean, this stuff was all over the place.
Yeah, there was
And
opportunities to play.
yeah, and so that meant that not just musicians, but normal people wanted to hear weird music. I could put it like that,
Okay.
or more interesting, adventurous music.
I don't think it was weird.
It wasn't weird.
I think it was a
It was
natural.
phenomenal, but it wasn't just musicians going to hear jazz or whatever. It was a big range of stuff and a range of people that would go.
Yeah,
And yeah,
it's kind of missing. I guess to get back to your original point, it sort of is missing, but there is what there is nowadays. I can't say I get out like I used to, you know,
Well, and I think that, honestly, I think that COVID's had a lot to do with that. People are more tempered in their desire to be
in
out and
their
about.
choices.
Yeah, you're seeing more now than there was even a year ago.
Yeah.
yeah,
Blues Fest last year had a bigger turnout than it did the previous couple of years because I know that they were shut down during 2020,
Yeah.
but 21 and 22 were actually halfway decent. 23 was looking really good. And I'll be interested to see what 23 is or 24 is going to be like in September. But Dave, you and I met back in June down at the Blues Fest. And I had always heard of the Blue Avenue Delegates, but I'd never met any of you guys. And at that time, you were down there with what's the band?
Oh, the Jack Pine
No,
folks
the
or
Toe Tappers.
Bigfoot Bob and the
Bigfoot Bob and the Toe Tappers. Yeah,
Bob Schultz.
that's Big Fun. Okay, I just tied the two together. Very cool. So, and it was kind of cool because in the process of having a discussion with Dave, he presented me with what I consider two of the greatest gifts I've received so far musically, and that was a copy of two CDs from the Blue Avenue Delegates. One of them being recorded live at the Green Door, one of them being recorded live at a Small Planet. And it's really cool because they're actually doing a little bit of reunion activity that started late last year and doing a couple this year. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys Wednesday. I can't tell you. Um, but talk about your time with Blue Avenue Delegates and your growth as a musician there.
Oh, geez. Um, the Blue Avenue Delegates. Well, it's interesting because I was playing in a very similar band like that over in Flint, and I thought we were that we were pretty good, and actually we were very, very good. Um, Doing a variety of music, blues, R&B, stuff like Chicago, Blood, Sweat, and Tears.
Nice.
And as luck would have it, I got a call to sub for one of the players on the Blue Avenue Delegates, which I didn't know anything about, but that was in Lansing at a place called the Green Door. And there was another guy playing horn who I did know in that band. And I
Okay.
walked in and I said, "So what, Gary, what do we got here?" Something along that line. And right at that time, Bob Schultz, who I'd never met, walked in and he says, "Hey, where do you hear this guy? Sounds like Ray Charles." And "Oh, yeah, right, okay." And he started singing, and sure enough, he sounded a lot like Ray Charles. And that was the beginning of like 7 years of Mondays at the Green Door.
Wow.
What I didn't know is they'd been there 8 years before that time.
Okay. All right. And this is about what year?
This was in 1989,
Okay. All right.
I think.
Wow.
And what I found out is the band was just full of excellent players and performers. And one thing that happened several times on Monday is that band had a reputation. And it's like if bands from out of town were in town and they were looking for something to do, some of the people would show up on Mondays. Like there's a band called Georgia Satellite, Siegel Schwall Blues Band, and they'd come in and sit in with the band and have newfound respect by the time the evening was over for local musicians.
Yeah, yeah. And let's be fair. Blue Avenue Delegates is not just a little band. We're not talking three, four, five guys. How many people on average do you see on the stage with Blue Avenue Delegates?
Usually eight. So there'd be 3 to 4 horns,
Yep.
full rhythm section, meaning guitar or 2 guitars, bass, drums, keyboards.
An octet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And just excellent, really, really good players who were multi-dimensional,
Yes.
who could play all sorts of styles. They could not only play blues or R&B, but many of them were versed in jazz, such as myself. That's what I'd done almost exclusively up to that point. So they were really versatile, well-versed players who with great knowledge of repertoire and everything else. So it was just amazing.
And I have to tell you, y'all haven't lost a step. I got to see you just a few weeks back playing at the Green Dot Stable.
Right.
And of course, the very first song that I heard by Blue Avenue Delegates was Party Till the Cows Come Home. So I was a pain in
Elvin
the
Bishop.
I was a pain in the ass to these guys, okay? I'm like, I called them before the gig. I called Huber before the gig. I'm like, if you can possibly get that song and play it, I would love to hear that song because that's what made me a fan, you know? And truly just listening to that music, and yes, it was from a different time. I didn't know you could record music at a live deal like you did at the Green Door and Small Planet like that and put out CDs, and they sound incredible, you know. But you had who is your mix guy for that?
I have no idea.
Wasn't it Brown?
Well,
Wasn't it
I don't know.
Glenn Brown?
Glenn? I think it was
No,
Glenn Brown.
It's not
Was it?
Glenn Brown?
No.
That's not true. Actually, I do know. There was a guy named Dave Matchett who recorded the first recording at the Green Door,
Okay.
and the band released a cassette.
Okay.
So it was not much of a stretch to get that cleaned up a little bit and
Sure.
then press up a CD out at, at disc
Okay.
makers. The second thing at the Small Planet, I don't know who recorded that. I think it might have been the sound man.
Okay.
But we came up, or I shouldn't say we. I took an old cassette and tried to clean that up as best we could, find the tunes that were, shall we say, had a decent enough sound to them to do that.
And we happen to disagree on which of the two are the better CD. I happen to like Green Door. He likes Small Planet, but that's all right.
Yeah.
You are watching Time Signatures. My name is Erv. I'm glad to have you here with me, and we also are very pleased to have two musicians from the Michigan area who travel around a lot. They're still quite active. Dave Huber, who plays saxophone, and we got our drummer over here. We're going to talk to him in just a second about that, Stuart Tucker. And Dave introduced me to you quite by accident one day. We were having a discussion on the phone. He goes, well, if you like this music, you ought to check this out. And he tells me about this interview with Stu Tucker that was done at a radio station, Northeastern Michigan. What was the station again?
WNMC.
WNMC. And I sat there and I listened to this interview with Stu, and it was all about this guy by the name of Chicago Pete. Now, Chicago Pete you would think would be hugely recognizable by name. There's a lot of people in the Lansing area that are big in the blues that don't know who Chicago Pete is. But you played with Chicago Pete, didn't you? Part of the Detroiters?
Yeah, for 5 years. Yeah.
Talk about that. What was that experience like?
It was a fantastic immersion into the Southern blues, slight soul, and slight R&B mix. band with full enthusiasm and knowledge for a stage performance and musicianship and fellowship, I would say, among the bandmates overall. Um, so there was a lot to learn from me. And like I said earlier, I was getting into the blues and Big Mouth Blues Band. And so
Mhm.
we had a gig. I think you were on it, David. And Eileen Orr was on keyboards on that gig. Were you on that one? It was at the
I
Delta
don't,
Lady. Maybe not, but
yeah, I don't know.
Big Mouth Band and our bass player from Flint did not show up. And so Eileen Orr, I just seen Chicago Pete play. I might have seen him at the Detroit Blues Festival, but he had a residency at the Soup Kitchen. And I think that was probably where I saw him. He was there like every Thursday or something. And wow, it was amazing. Matching tuxedos and horn section and all this. And so there we are at the Delta Lady and Eileen Orr and I said, we don't have a bass player. And she says, I'll call Chicago Pete. And I was floored. What, you can actually call that guy and he'll come play? Because Pete was a bass player, a really, really good bass player. And she did. And he showed up and I
Wow.
played the gig. And then he called me later to play in the band and played in the band with no rehearsal. And yeah, Bachelorette Lounge in Conant Gardens. A lot of musicians from Conant Gardens you may have heard of recently, like recently departed Jay Dilla, Amp Fiddler. There's a lot of musicians from that area. It's north of Hamtramck.
Okay.
Anyway, I was living in Lapeer then still, but we made the scene and played on the revolving stage, the band. While the band's playing, the stage is revolving. It
Wow.
stops when, we're not playing.
Okay.
So that was interesting. But, um, and then the band had, as I've said before, Joe Hunter on keyboards and little Walter Hamilton on guitar, who sang, and James Chaney on tenor sax, who's just a powerhouse. David has heard him play a whole bunch. And then a guy named Wendell West on trumpet. So then the band changed and evolved, and then we had all these gigs. He had already made that album that you may be talking about, Jim, that you have, the Voting Blues.
Sure.
It was coming out right then. And so I wasn't involved in that, but we were playing a bunch of those songs on gigs. And we got all these gigs, and I got that band gigs in Flint and Ann Arbor, and Pete was booking gigs. We literally had to decide to not play on a weekend because otherwise we were just playing every weekend and stuff during the week too. Um, and started getting on more and more festivals, the
Wow.
Detroit Blues Festival, and we played the first African World Festival in Detroit. Played that was the first one. They still have it, and yeah, so a lot of stuff like that. And I learned a lot about the blues, and yeah,
So another case of right place, right time. Just
yeah, it was. It was. But, we were going for it. All of us, we were going for it and
sure.
wanted to do some stuff and found some other people who were doing some stuff. And there were a lot of gigs to be had. It was great. Great music.
So you guys have both got a really eclectic background in music and a diverse experience. Talk about, and I'm going to start with Dave on this one. Talk about maybe your most memorable gig with some of the big names that you played with. Can you come up with some that you've played with that just stick in the corner of your mind?
Um, yeah, I can actually. It wasn't all blues or
Sure,
R&B for
sure.
me, but um, I did some shows that were fun. I played with the Temptations a number of times,
Very cool.
the Four Tops, a few times Frankie Valli, a few times Lou Rawls. Um, I'd say probably uh, out of all that, I did a gig at Detroit Montreux Jazz Festival in 82, maybe 83.
Okay.
And I don't think I'd ever played a concert quite that big. I played with, I was in a government funded jazz orchestra called the People's Jazz Band.
Based out of Flint.
Yeah, based out of Flint. That was maybe the most memorable thing for me because it was my first time playing any kind of jazz festival. And so we played and we got a standing ovation.
Nice.
And so we played an encore, got another standing ovation, did another encore.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's just one of many really fun things.
What
You
kind of
know.
music were you playing on that?
It was all music written or and arranged by Michigan artists.
Nice.
That was part of the equation for us. So we were playing original music or music that was arranged specifically for the band, and that was like in a 11 piece orchestra.
Wow.
You know, so it was fun.
Very nice. Stuart, how about you, man?
A
Big
few,
names?
big names. Not that well. Chicago Pete's a pretty big name.
Yeah.
The one gig in particular, there were a bunch, and I maybe not remembering some of the most fun ones, which I should do, but a couple at Hart Plaza one time. We were playing the Blues Festival, and we were opening for John Lee Hooker. He was playing right after us,
Very cool.
and that was pretty heavy duty, and it was raining, so they condensed the pyramid and the big main stage into this inner theater, they used to call it. It's kind of a big echo chamber is what it is, but they put all the bands in there and went one after the other, and I was like, oh, we're going to open for Johnny Hooker. But the other guys in the band, like, they knew John Lee Hooker. And James Taney, the sax player, was in Hooker's band. And when Hooker lived in Detroit in the early 60s, and Joe
Wow.
Hunter was in the band too. And they weren't like in awe. They're like, no, we're going to cut him. They weren't like, and I'm like, oh, gee whiz. And they'd laugh. They'd sort of make fun of him and stuff in a good-hearted way.
Sure.
And they'd laugh and talk. You know, Lee had a stutter, and they knew him. And they do this. They sort of imitate and then they just say, "But he's got all the money," and they just break out laughing, which is true. And that was something because the crowd was there, and we were not holding back, and that was a real good one. That recording that we have from Floods in Ann Arbor, and that's just a bar, just a bar, hippie folk bar, blues bar, and that was your buddy Nardella was playing there in those days. And
Yeah.
It was prime, and it went
Yeah.
on and on for years, and this shambolic performances there. I mean, just the stage was up about head high. You'd walk up the stage in the front window, and the band would just go down, just walk among the crowd, and all this, the horn players, they do all this in the middle of the song.
Yeah, Pete went for broke.
He did many, many nights. So there's a lot of that. But after that, I continued to play nothing but blues till I was like 33 or 34. I never really played much rock music.
Okay.
But then I sort of got into playing with singer-songwriters and sort of folk. Played a couple big gigs with this woman named Jo Sarah Pear, and that was kind of heavy. Played on Prairie Home Companion a couple times. That was a real buzz. We played on some really big stages with her, like out in Ithaca, New York. Pretty big. It's pretty thrilling, and yeah, those are kind of big also.
Yeah.
Very cool. Now, you guys are both still active in music. Probably as busy as you want to be, I'd imagine.
I want to be more busy. I'm somewhat busy, but I got stuff going on. But
Yeah, ditto. That's
Okay.
always the case.
So you're starting to feel like we're coming out of that post deal, COVID, yeah.
sure,
Are you starting to see that corner
it's-
turn a little bit
well,
more?
I turned a little while ago, but it's different. It's going to be
It
different.
is different, isn't it?
When we talked about the clubs and all that, and how the thing doesn't exist from before.
Right.
That already sort of didn't exist when COVID hit, for
Yeah.
sure. But since COVID, what's there is many venues like clubs and things start early and end early.
which is good.
It's good in some ways, it is. But as some people have pointed out, a lot of times now you are playing as sort of dinner, and people aren't out to have a ripping good time listening to a band. So that's kind of a drag, but um, it is. They're shorter gigs too, which I like longer. I like playing a long time, but some people like that. But I like playing shorter. I like doing it all, but um, and there's more microbreweries. That was already starting before COVID,
Yes.
but that's definitely, and microbreweries are better than a lot of old skanky bars in a lot of ways.
Old
But
dive bars. Yeah.
I like dive bars though.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm
yeah.
gonna put them down, but there don't seem to be that many dive bars. Dive bars now all have 20 flat screen TVs in them.
We need dive
People
bars.
are watching sports in every dive bar, and when we were playing back then, that wasn't the case. There'd be
No,
like
that's
one
true.
TV in a bar,
And it'd
maybe,
be turned off, right?
Yeah, yeah.
or beyond, but people weren't always watching sports, and now that's kind of what they're doing in the corner bar, and not even calling it a dive bar, the corner bar. And so that's a distraction from the music. And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
but that was already going on before COVID. But yeah, the earlier hours are a thing since COVID, because a lot of venues are having problems getting employees still. We kind of
Yes.
haven't turned that corner.
No, I see that even still at the Green Door in Lansing. They're open. I think it's Friday, Saturday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and that's it.
Wow.
There's a lot of bars that are not open full time. They're just open part time.
No, that's true.
So
And they don't sell food there anymore either. That's the other thing. Of course, if you walk out the door at the Green Door, you got your Chinese to one side, you got your pizza to the other, you got Mexican food across the street. I mean, there are opportunities to get food, and they don't mind if you bring food in with you,
that's cool.
but they don't have it. That's one of the things that went away.
It's more work, and they can't get the employees. They can't keep kitchen staffed, and it's
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true enough.
Guys, you have been in the business, I would say easily 40 years or more. Looking back over your time as a musician, professional and otherwise, I mean, I know you've seen a lot of things change and a lot of things come up and whatnot. I'd like to start with each of you and give me your best advice for musicians that are coming up today. Dave, we'll start with you. What would you say to newer, younger musicians? Because I'm sure you're seeing quite a few new guys out there.
Oh, that's true. But my view on it hasn't changed all these years.
Okay.
And it goes down to this. If you want to play, you have to play. So that means if you want to be a musician, then you have to do it. I mean, you shouldn't have to think about it.
Right.
It's like if you're hungry, you don't stand in front of the refrigerator and think about it.
Yeah.
You open the door and you see what's there. So as a musician, if you want to play, you have to play. There's no way around it.
Stu?
Yeah, sort of a different but similar version of that. You got to get out there and make the effort to have some kind of a
Something to plug into.
ensemble that's going to work and going to get out there and make your own scene. That's what a lot of the younger cats do. They kick down some doors, try to get into places that don't even have music. And that happens. It can happen more when you're young, that's for sure.
Sure.
I remember I interviewed the great jazz drummer, a Detroit guy named Danny Spencer. I interviewed him like 40 years ago. I was writing for a college paper, and he told me that then. And I was playing that, and playing all these gigs. And he said, guys have got to make their own scene. And it's true. And as you're developing young players, as you're developing yourselves and your instrument, make sure you know how to play out in public, and you have your act together when you play in public. I see young jazz players that are really good, and they get gigs in public, and they don't have a PA, they don't have and they don't only tell their certain little friends, they're not really covering all the bases, and you don't have to turn yourself into a promotion machine, but you got to have those little bitty things taken care of as well.
Sure.
To make people pay attention to your gig more than just you playing up there.
Yeah, you got to look for opportunities.
Yep.
That's it.
Stuart Tucker, Dave Huber, thank you so much for being here with us today on Time Signatures. I appreciate both of you. And I want to thank you both for taking time for being here today. I've enjoyed the visit. I've enjoyed the music. I mean, we've Until today, I hadn't heard any Chicago Pete that wasn't live, because I had heard the copy that Dave shared with me that was live, The Gift. Compliments of Professor Larry Red at MSU many, many years ago. But I got to hear some stuff today that was out of the studio. I got to hear music that was written by Ernie Harwell in part. I mean, it was very, very cool. And I really enjoy the opportunity to expand and learn a little bit more. And I can honestly say that I've learned a little bit more today by hanging with you guys, and I appreciate it so much.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And this is Jim Ervin reminding you that keeping the blues alive is everyone's responsibility. I appreciate everybody that watches, that listens, that follows, that subscribes. Thank you so much. Once again, keeping the blues alive, it's everyone's responsibility, but preserving the history of the blues one story at a time, that's my mission. Until next time, so long.
This has been Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. For more information on cabs, visit capitalareablues.org. You can find this episode and past episodes at lccconnect.org. The Time Signatures theme song, Michigan Roads, is used by permission and was written by Root Doctor, featuring Freddie Cunningham.
You know I'm trying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
Until next time, keep on keeping the blues alive.